The year is 1968. California. The Golden State. Beaches, sunshine, the American dream. But somewhere in the shadows of that dream, something dark was awakening. A killer was preparing to step into the spotlight. Not just to take lives, but to play a game. A game with the police. With the media. With the entire country. And the terrifying part? He was very, very good at it. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer. One of the most haunting unsolved cases in American history. A case that has baffled detectives, cryptographers, journalists, and amateur investigators for over 50 years. A case that remains, officially, unsolved. Let's go back to where it all began. It's December 20th, 1968. A quiet Friday night, in Benicia, California. A small, peaceful town, northeast of San Francisco. The kind of place where nothing much ever happened. David Faraday was 17 years old. A good student. An athlete. By all accounts, a kind and well-liked young man. That night, he had asked out a girl from his school. Her name was Betty Lou Jensen. She was 16. It was their first date. They drove out to a remote area, on Lake Herman Road. A lonely stretch of road, surrounded by dark fields. It was a popular spot for young couples, looking for a quiet place to talk. They had no idea, they were being watched. Sometime around 11 o'clock at night, a car pulled up beside them. A gunshot shattered the silence. Then another. Then more. By the time it was over, both teenagers were dead. David had been shot in the head, at close range. Betty Lou had been shot 5 times in the back, as she tried to run. She only made it about 30 feet, from the car. When a passing driver discovered the bodies, and called the police, investigators arrived to find a scene that made very little sense. There had been no robbery. No signs of a struggle inside the vehicle. Nothing was taken. No one had a reason to target these 2 teenagers. It appeared completely random. At the time, police had very few leads. It was a brutal, senseless crime, but not yet unusual enough to suggest the beginning of something much larger. That would come later. 6 months passed. July 4, 1969. Independence Day. The Blue Rock Springs Park, in Vallejo, California. Another warm summer night. Another young couple, sitting in a parked car. Mike Mageau was 19. Darlene Ferrin was 22, married, with a young daughter. The 2 of them were friends, perhaps more. They had driven out to the park, late that evening. At some point, another car pulled into the parking lot. It sat there for a while, then drove away. Mike didn't think much of it. But then it came back. A figure got out of the car, and walked toward them. Before Mike or Darlene could react, a flashlight blinded them. Then the shooting started. The attacker fired multiple times into the car, then walked away. But as he reached his own vehicle, he heard Mike moaning. So he turned around, walked back, and fired again. Then he left. Darlene Ferrin died from her wounds. Mike Mageau, despite being shot multiple times, somehow survived. He would later describe the attacker as a heavy-set white male, with light brown, curly hair. But the details of his description were vague. The attack had happened so fast. So violently. And that was when things took a very strange turn. About 40 minutes after the shooting, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. A calm, low male voice spoke. He reported the double shooting, at Blue Rock Springs Park. Then he said something extraordinary. He told the operator that he had also committed the murder of the two teenagers, on Lake Herman Road, 6 months earlier. Then he hung up. Police traced the call to a payphone not far from the scene. Nobody was there. And then, the letters arrived. 3 weeks after the July 4th attack, 3 Bay Area newspapers received letters in the mail, simultaneously. The San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, the Vallejo Times-Herald. The letters were nearly identical. Each one claimed responsibility for the murders at Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs. Each one contained details about the crimes that only the killer, or someone at the scene, could have known. The letters also contained a demand. The killer wanted his letters printed on the front page of each newspaper. If they refused, he threatened, he would go on a killing spree. He would kill 12 people over the coming weekend, targeting buses and other public spaces. But perhaps most chilling of all, each letter came with an additional page. A cipher. Together, the 3 letters formed one long encrypted message. 68 characters in the first section, 69 in the second, 68 in the third. The killer claimed that when decoded, the message would reveal his identity. The newspapers published the letters. The public was terrified. And the hunt began. The cipher arrived, like something out of a nightmare. Strange symbols, mixed letters, backwards characters, invented glyphs. Whoever had constructed this message had clearly put significant thought into it. It wasn't simple. It wasn't random. It was designed to challenge. Law enforcement immediately brought in cryptographers and code-breaking experts. The FBI took an interest. So did amateur puzzle enthusiasts across the country. Everyone wanted to be the one to crack the Zodiac's code. For a week, the cipher resisted all attempts. Then, on August 8, 1969, a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife, Betty, cracked it. They had been working on it at home, using traditional cryptanalysis techniques, looking for patterns, identifying likely words, testing assumptions. The decoded message read as follows. I like killing people, because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all that I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name, because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. The misspellings were noted. Whether they were intentional or genuine errors remained debated. The last 18 characters of the cipher were never decoded. The killer had included them, apparently, for a reason. Perhaps as a signature. Perhaps as a deliberate tease. They remain unsolved, to this day. But the decrypted portion sent chills through everyone who read it. This wasn't just a murderer. This was someone who believed he was building an army for the afterlife. Someone who viewed his victims, not as human beings, but as objects to be collected. And he had more letters to send. On August 7, 1969, just one day before the cipher was decoded, another letter arrived. This time to the San Francisco Examiner. And in this letter, the killer gave himself a name. Dear Editor. This is the Zodiac speaking. That opening line would become one of the most recognized phrases in American true crime history. The Zodiac. He had named himself. The name may have referred to his use of astrological symbols in his first cipher. Or it may have been chosen simply for its dark, cosmic resonance. No one knows for certain. But from that point forward, the entire country knew what to call him. The Zodiac Killer. September 27, 1969. Lake Berryessa. A popular recreational lake, in Napa County, California. A warm Saturday afternoon. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were both students at Pacific Union College. They were former sweethearts, who had remained close friends. They had spent the afternoon relaxing by the lakeshore, lying on a blanket, talking, enjoying the sunshine. Then a figure approached from the tree-line. He was wearing something deeply unsettling. A dark hood over his head, with a white crosshair symbol on the chest. The symbol of the Zodiac. He was holding a gun. He told them he was an escaped convict. That he needed their car and their money, to get to Mexico. He said he wouldn't hurt them. He asked Cecilia to tie up Brian, with a length of pre-cut rope he had brought with him. Then he tied Cecilia himself, tightening the knots. And then he drew a knife. He stabbed Brian 5 times in the back. He stabbed Cecilia 10 times. Then he walked calmly back, toward the tree-line. Brian Hartnell survived, though his injuries were severe. Cecilia Shepard was rushed to the hospital, but died 2 days later from her wounds. Before leaving the scene, the attacker had done something unusual. He had walked to Brian's car, and used a felt tip marker to write on the door. He wrote the dates of his previous attacks. And then, beneath those, the date of this attack. He added the words. By gun. By knife. By gun. He was keeping score. And once again, a phone call was made to the police. This time to the Napa County Sheriff's Department. The same low, calm voice. Reporting the attack. Giving no name. 2 weeks later. October 11, 1969. San Francisco. A yellow cab driver named Paul Stein picked up a fare in the Union Square area of the city. He was 29 years old. A graduate student at San Francisco State University, working the night shift, to pay his way through school. His passenger asked to be taken to Presidio Heights, a quiet residential neighborhood, near Golden Gate Park. At the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, the cab stopped. A single gunshot rang out. Stein was shot in the head, at point-blank range. He died immediately. The killer then did something strange. Witnesses in a nearby house, 3 teenagers who had heard the shot, and looked out their window, saw the man reach into the cab, and begin tearing a piece of cloth from Stein's shirt. Then he wiped down the interior of the cab with the cloth. Then he walked away. He walked directly north. Into the Presidio. Into the dark. The teenagers called the police. Officers arrived quickly. A patrol car actually passed a man, matching the description near the park, heavy-set, white, wearing glasses, but they had been given incorrect information over the radio, told to look for a black male suspect. The man they passed was not stopped. He disappeared into the night. The letter that followed was different. The Zodiac wrote again. But this time, his tone had shifted. He was angry. He mocked the San Francisco Police Department. He bragged about how close officers had come to catching him, so close, he said, that he could have shot them. But he hadn't. He wanted to play games, not end them. And with this letter, he included something new. A swatch of Paul Stein's shirt. A piece torn from the cab driver's clothing. Proof. A trophy. A taunt. He also is. Law enforcement was under enormous pressure. The San Francisco Police Department, the Napa County Sheriff's Office, the Vallejo Police Department, the Solano County Sheriff's Office, multiple agencies were now involved in what was becoming one of the largest manhunts in California history. The FBI had been called in to assist. Tips flooded in from across the state. Thousands of leads. Hundreds of potential suspects. Every anonymous tip, every suspicious neighbor, every strange coworker was reported. Investigators worked around the clock. But the Zodiac was careful. Forensic science in the late 1960s was nothing like what exists today. There was no DNA analysis. No digital surveillance. No cell phone records. No national database of fingerprints that could be quickly searched. What investigators had were handwriting samples, eyewitness descriptions, and whatever physical evidence could be gathered from crime scenes. The problem was that the eyewitness descriptions varied. Some said he was heavy-set. Others described him as average build. Heights ranged from 5'8" to 6 foot. Hair color was described differently by different witnesses. Was he wearing a disguise? Was memory simply unreliable under extreme stress? Both were possible. The fingerprints lifted from the Stein crime scene didn't match any known suspects in the system. The handwriting on the letters was analyzed extensively, but handwriting analysis was, and remains, an imperfect science. The Zodiac was not making it easy. And then, he began to go quiet. Between 1969 and 1971, the Zodiac sent a number of additional letters. Some contained more ciphers. Some contained maps. Some contained only taunts. He wrote to well-known defense attorney Melvin Belli, pleading for help, claiming to be sick, and suffering from headaches, that drove him to kill. Whether this was genuine, or theater, was impossible to know. He sent a letter claiming he had a bomb. He referenced films and books, including The Most Dangerous Game, a story about a man who hunts humans for sport. He claimed in one letter to have killed 37 people. Official investigators attributed only 5 confirmed deaths to the Zodiac, along with 2 additional confirmed victims who survived. But the actual total, if his claims were real, could have been much higher. Or the number could have been pure fabrication. Designed to terrify. Designed to make the case seem even larger, even more impossible to solve. And then, after 1971, the letters nearly stopped. One arrived in 1974. A brief, unsettling note to the Chronicle, referencing the film The Exorcist, which the writer described with apparent amusement. He also complained about a newspaper column, and announced that he had now killed a total of 37. Then silence. For years. For decades. The Zodiac, whoever he was, had seemingly disappeared. Over the decades, investigators and amateur sleuths have proposed dozens of suspects. Some names have come up repeatedly. Others have emerged from new research, or family confessions. All of them remain unproven. Let's examine the most significant ones. Arthur Lee Allen. For many investigators, Allen remains the most compelling suspect ever identified. A former schoolteacher, and convicted sex offender. Allen lived in Vallejo, and had connections to the geographic areas where the attacks occurred. The circumstantial evidence against him was striking. A friend named Don Cheney claimed that Allen had spoken to him, before any of the attacks, about wanting to hunt human beings. Allen had apparently spoken about calling himself Zodiac, and writing letters to the police. Allen also owned a Zodiac brand watch, the same brand whose logo bore a crosshair design, nearly identical to the symbol the killer wore at Lake Berryessa. When investigators searched his trailer in 1972, they found blood on his knife. They found children's rubber boots, stained with what appeared to be blood. They found a bag that, according to reports, smelled of pipe bombs. But Allen had an alibi for at least one of the confirmed attacks. His blood type did not match samples taken from a Zodiac letter envelope. Handwriting analysis did not definitively link him to the Zodiac's letters. Later, when early DNA technology was applied to stamps and envelopes from Zodiac letters, the DNA profile produced did not match Arthur Lee Allen. Allen died of a heart attack in 1992, never having been formally charged. Was he the Zodiac? The debate continues. Richard Gajkowski. A less well-known figure. Gajkowski was a journalist and filmmaker who worked in San Francisco during the period of the Zodiac attacks. He was identified as a suspect primarily through the research of a man named Blaine Blaine, who believed Gajkowski's voice matched recordings of the Zodiac's phone calls. Some researchers also claim to have identified hidden messages within the Zodiac ciphers that pointed to Gajkowski's name. Gajkowski died in 2004. No formal investigation was ever opened against him. Lawrence Kane. Kane suffered a brain injury in a car accident in 1962 that reportedly altered his personality significantly. He had connections to the Lake Tahoe and Napa areas. His name appeared in a phone book found in the possession of one of the Zodiac's victims. Some researchers have pointed to linguistic similarities between Kane's documented writing and the Zodiac's letters. Others have disputed this analysis entirely. Kane died in 2010. Gary Francis Post. In 2021, a team of cold case investigators called the Case Breakers made national headlines when they announced they had identified the Zodiac Killer as Gary Francis Post, a house painter who died in 2018. They claimed that anagram puzzles hidden within the Zodiac ciphers revealed Post's full name. They also pointed to facial similarities between Post and a composite sketch of the Zodiac. The FBI did not confirm these findings. The San Francisco Police Department stated, the case remained open and unsolved. Most established Zodiac researchers were skeptical. The Case Breakers stood by their conclusion. The question was never officially resolved. There were others. Many others. A man named Ross Sullivan, a librarian who bore resemblance to composite sketches. A man named Louis Myers, who reportedly confessed to a friend on his deathbed. Jack Terrence, identified by his own stepson, based on a deathbed confession. Each suspect had advocates. Each suspect had critics. And none were ever proven, beyond reasonable doubt. While the murders themselves are deeply disturbing, much of the enduring fascination with the Zodiac case centers on his ciphers. He sent 4 in total. They are known by their lengths, the 408, the 340, the 13, and the 32. The 408, the one split into 3 parts, and sent to the newspapers in 1969, was solved within a week, by Donald and Betty Hardin. Its decoded contents, we have already discussed. But the final 18 characters of that cipher have never been decoded. Cryptographers have argued for decades about whether they contain a hidden name or message, or whether they are simply deliberate nonsense, placed there to frustrate attempts at solution. The 13-character cipher was sent with a letter threatening to bomb a school bus. It has never been solved. Many believe it may not be a true cipher at all, but rather a string of random characters, designed to look significant. The 32-character cipher, sometimes called the "My Name Is" cipher, because the Zodiac claimed it contained his identity, was attached to a letter in 1970. Despite decades of effort, it was not solved publicly during the 20th century. And then there was the 340. For over 50 years, the 340 cipher sat unsolved. It had been analyzed by professional cryptographers, by amateur enthusiasts, by academics, by intelligence agencies, by computer programs. Many attempts were made. Many solutions proposed. All were challenged, disputed, or debunked. Then, in December of 2020, a team of 3 amateur codebreakers announced that they had solved it. David Oranchak, a software developer from Virginia. Sam Blake, a mathematician from Australia. Jarl, the Zodiac Killer did not just leave behind crime scenes and ciphers. He left behind a cultural wound that has never fully healed. In the years following the attacks, the Bay Area was transformed. People who had left their doors unlocked began locking them. Young couples who had parked in remote areas stopped. A free, open, optimistic culture, the culture of Woodstock, and the summer of love, suddenly had a shadow cast over it. The fear was real. And it lingered. The media coverage was unlike anything seen before. Newspapers competed fiercely for the latest Zodiac letter, the latest development in the investigation. Editors made decisions that are debated to this day. Was it right to publish his letters? Did doing so give him exactly what he wanted? Did it inspire further violence? There are no easy answers. What is clear is that the Zodiac understood media. He understood that the newspapers needed stories. That fear sold papers. That a mysterious, uncaught killer was a more compelling narrative than a criminal quickly apprehended. He played the media like an instrument. The Zodiac case also had a significant influence on law enforcement. It accelerated conversations about interagency communication and coordination. Multiple police departments had been working the case in relative isolation, occasionally sharing information, but often duplicating effort or missing connections. The failures of the Zodiac investigation contributed, in small but real ways, to the development of better multi-jurisdictional cooperation in major crime cases. It also became a teaching case for criminology and criminal psychology programs. The Zodiac's behavior, the taunting letters, the public claims of responsibility, the apparent desire for both recognition and concealment, became foundational material for the study of criminal psychology and the development of offender profiling. In popular culture, the Zodiac became one of the most referenced and reimagined figures in American crime history. David Fincher's 2007 film Zodiac, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Mark Ruffalo, and Robert Downey Jr., is widely considered one of the finest true crime films ever made. Meticulously researched, it portrays the investigation with a kind of haunting patience, conveying not just the horror of the crimes, but the exhausting, obsessive, ultimately incomplete nature of the pursuit. The film is based largely on the books written by Robert Graysmith, a cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle, who became obsessed with the case and spent years attempting to solve it. Graysmith pointed strongly toward Arthur Lee Allen as his primary suspect. The case has also inspired novels, podcasts, documentary series, television episodes, comic books, and an entire subculture of amateur investigators who continue to research and debate it online. The Zodiac Killer is not merely a historical figure. He is a living presence in American cultural anxiety. In all of the fascination with ciphers, and suspects, and cultural impact, it is easy to lose sight of what the Zodiac case actually is, at its heart. It is the story of people who were killed. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were teenagers on their first date. They had their whole lives in front of them. They died on a dark road because someone chose to target them. Darlene Ferrin was a 22-year-old mother. She had a daughter who grew up without her. People who knew Darlene described her as warm, vivid, full of life. Cecilia Shepard was a 22-year-old student, studying music and planning her future. She survived the initial attack, conscious and communicating with paramedics, before dying in the hospital 2 days later. Paul Stein was a 29-year-old graduate student, working nights to pay for school. He was shot in the back of the head while doing his job. These are the confirmed victims. There may have been others. Each of them deserves to be remembered, not as a data point in an unsolved mystery, but as a person. A full person, with relationships, and ambitions, and a history. The Zodiac turned them into props, in his theater. The very least we can do, in discussing his case, is to remember that they were real. The Zodiac case has never been officially closed. The San Francisco Police Department lists it as an open investigation. Cold case units have revisited it periodically over the decades, applying new forensic technologies as they became available. DNA analysis was attempted, using genetic material recovered from stamps and envelope flaps. The results were inconclusive, in part because of degradation over time, and in part because of possible contamination. In 2018, Vallejo police conducted a fresh examination of surviving physical evidence, using modern techniques. In 2021, the case breakers announced their findings regarding Gary Francis' post, though this was not accepted by official investigators. Amateur investigation continues, at an extraordinary level. Online forums, dedicated websites, and active communities of researchers continue to analyze every aspect of the case, from handwriting, to geographic profiling, to linguistic analysis. New technologies emerge. New angles are proposed. Old suspects are revisited. New ones emerge. And yet the case remains, officially unsolved. There is something in human nature that resists the idea of a mystery without an ending. We want resolution. We want justice. We want to know. The Zodiac case denies us that. Whoever he was, he lived with his secret. He may have watched the investigation from a distance, reading newspaper coverage of his own crimes, aware of the theories and the suspects, none of which pointed definitively at him. He may have been someone entirely unremarkable. A neighbor. A coworker. A regular customer at a local diner. He may have had a family. A house. A job. People who trusted him. The frightening possibility at the center of this case is not that monsters look different from the rest of us. It's that they might look exactly the same. Over 50 years have passed since David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were killed on Lake Herman Road. The Bay Area has changed beyond recognition. The detectives who worked the original case are mostly gone. The newspapers that published the Zodiac's letters have transformed and, in some cases, ceased to exist. Technology that would have seemed like science fiction in 1969 is now commonplace. The tools available to investigators today are almost incomprehensibly more powerful than what existed when the Zodiac was active. And still, the case is open. Still, there are people who have devoted decades of their lives to solving it. Some were professional investigators. Some were journalists. Some were ordinary people, like Robert Graysmith, who simply could not let go. The obsession the Zodiac inspires is itself a kind of legacy. A dark one. One he seemed to anticipate, and even desire. He wanted to be known. He wanted to be feared. He wanted to be talked about. In that, he succeeded completely. But here is the thing, he may not have fully anticipated. In wanting to be known, he also left evidence behind. Letters filled with his thinking, his handwriting, his psychology. Ciphers that, slowly, are being decoded. Physical evidence that modern science continues to analyze. He thought he was smarter than everyone chasing him. Maybe he was. Or maybe the answer has been waiting, all this time, in something he left behind. A stamp. A fiber. A partial print. A name hidden in a cipher. Maybe the question isn't whether he'll ever be identified. Maybe the question is simply, when? The Zodiac wrote, in one of his letters. I shall not tell you what my name is, for you will try to slow down, or stop my collecting of slaves. 50 years later, no one has slowed down. The search continues. And somewhere, in the vast and patient record of everything he left behind, the answer may still be waiting.